Jumia Food this month. Get up to 50% off on your favorite meals from over 500 restaurants in Jumia Food and free delivery in Kampala and Entebbe from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. Download the Jumia Food app today. Jumia Food. Everything you need delivered now.
All eligible NSSF members are advised to apply for their midterm benefits. To get started, visit www.nssfug.org/midterm or dial
Hello? 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 Okay. So, good morning one more time, our guests. We are starting right away. I would like to once again welcome you to this event. We're calling it a stakeholders engagement event because we would like to engage you through, if you can see, look at the programs. I think some of you were able to pick the program as you're coming in. We have been involved in two studies that looked at how the demand and supply sides of Tier 4 sector performed around the COVID pandemic period. And along those lines, we were able to draw some lessons that regards or are related to the resilience of the demand side, meaning the SMEs, and also the supply side, meaning the financial institutions, particularly the MFIs and some SACCOs. So we note some resilience that they showed, and we think that there is an opportunity to build on the resilience of these demand and supply side institutions, and then think around what life can be like post-COVID, or looking through the recovery and moving forward. So this is the engagement that we will be involving you in three ways. First is to have some perspectives from the consultants who did these two studies. So we have two presentations from the demand side, and then we also get to hear from the supply side. And then we'll also get to listen to some initiatives that build on the resilience of the demand and supply side institutions. We'll look at what is cooking up from the side of the financial sector deepening in Uganda. And we'll also get to hear from ABI. So my name is Jimmy Ebong. I'm your call me facilitator or moderator for this engagement event. And on the presenters, we will have from the demand side, a presenter from Microserve, and from the supply side, there's also a consultant. Both are online. They'll be presenting to us online. That's why we have these two screens. I think you will attend to the presentations from any of the screens that is closest to you. And again, I also would also like to acknowledge the partnership between FSD Uganda and ABI in this initiative in supporting the study, particularly the study that looked at the supply side with mackerel. Having said these few words, I would like to get us started with the first presentation, and that is I would like to invite Diana, who is presenting to us from Kenya, and she's online. So Diana, you can get us started with the presentation on the resilience of the bottom of the pyramid, resilience of the of the SMEs And then we will follow that with the presentation from M. Krill. So Martin, is Diana on? Okay.
Apparently, there have been multiple studies that have shown that men have been interested in sharing the responsibility of birth control with their partners. I don't know why this statement I feel like which more. Really. Because here, after a story came out of a guy who had 160 something kids and he wanted the government to help, please. Did the men want help? But anyway, so apparently, according to some studies that were done in Europe, the studies show that men were interested in sharing the responsibility of birth control with their partners, but until, of course, now there's been only two methods. You either use the condom or you use the vasectomy. Now that one, telling an African man go and like that.
Hello everyone, my name is Rahul Chatterjee and I am a senior manager in So I am going to take you through the findings of one demand-side study that we conducted in October of 2020. So this study was a mixed method research which we conducted in Uganda across 13 states where the sample size for the quantity part of the research was at 250 and for the quality research was 43 which we conducted quantity studies as well as for this study. So here is the basic structure of the presentation that I'm going to review today. So just 4 things. The first is the impact of COVID-19, how COVID impacted the human. Then second, and for the human connection. Then we do some segmentation of these things. And finally, the recommendations that we have based on this study were taken into account. The first section is about the impact of COVID-19 on the NCC system. The first thing that you see is the fall in the median the system just dropped for the NCC. Here you will see the data in the 4 different data points. One, when the situation before COVID-19, idea of 2020. Then what is the situation during the lockdowns in 2020 when COVID-19 hit the country and the MSCs. Then the third data point is during the lockdowns in 2021 that happened. And the fourth is the last data point is during our time of data collection, that was in October of 2021. So you can see compared to what was the situation before COVID-19 and the situation in October 2021, there is around 50% drop in terms of the median monthly household income of these MSCs. And we also saw how the impact was across gender and locality. You will see that actually the COVID hit women-run MSCs more compared to men. As you can see at the end of at the time of our data collection, the men-run MSCs could actually recover better compared to the women-run. For the women-run MSCs, the average monthly household income was around 450,000 UGX, where for the men-run it was 600,000 UGX. So that difference is there. And if we compare the situation across urban and rural areas, then you can see that the situation is a little better in the urban areas. They could recover faster than the rural areas. So there is a difference, of course, even before COVID, between the urban and rural areas, and in terms of their median income. But they could actually recover the urban area MSCs comparatively better compared to their rural counterparts. So this is the first point about the impact.
of COVID. Then the second point is about how they were going to run the business. 71% MSEs told us that the businesses were running for lesser time duration. So this was of course understandable because of the restriction measures that was in place to counter the COVID-19 situation. And at the time of our data collection, October 2021, the curfew, the night curfew, evening curfew was still in place, and the public transport services were actually getting stopped around 6 p.m. So the businesses were supposed to close by 4 p.m. so that they can get back home before the curfew starts. So that was the reason that a lot of our respondents said that they are operating for the lesser time duration, and only a few of them reported that they were operating from home. When we asked them that whether they have recovered or not, and if recovered, whether they have partially recovered or completely recovered, only 3% of the respondents said that the business has completely recovered, and 84% said that they are in the recovery process. Even among those 84%, 34% said that they will be soon back to the COVID-19 pre-COVID situation, and 50% said that it will take some time for them to go back to the pre-COVID situation. 14% of the total sample, they said that they are not going to recover at all, or they are going to close down their business, because their situation, the business situation, was very difficult for them to continue. Now, why so? What are the major challenges that the businesses face? This slide will give you a glimpse of that. The businesses have seen manifold challenges. The number of customers have dropped. The customers were also buying less volume compared to before, and also and this also led to a vicious cycle, because the number of customers was low and they were also buying less volume than before. So what happened that the MSCs also had to increase the price of their products and services so that they can manage for that lost volume, and that also in turn even discourages more customers to turn up, and the situation got worse. And more than half of the MSCs said that they have stopped selling products and services on credit, which they were doing before, because they needed cash to run their business and continue their operations. There was also significant impact on the supply chain. 59% of the MSCs reported that the volume of supplies and raw material has decreased by the suppliers. Why? So there were also multiple reasons, because there was transportation issues, and also the suppliers, their business also suffered. So they were also not in a position to provide a large volume of supply or raw material as compared to before. And 48% of the MSCs said that their suppliers also have stopped giving them supplies on credit, which was a common norm before. But because of this, the cash flow situation, which was already bad, became worse. In terms of, I already told that number of customers and the amount they were buying that decreased. How much? Then the MSC have seen 50% drop in the number of customers and 47% drop in the sales per customer, the volume of sales. So this is how the business was suffering a lot from all these different angles. And coupled with that, there were a lot of recurring costs. If you see, we also asked our respondents whether there has been any change in the business cost. And we asked about transport cost, rent, staff remuneration, utility bills, cost of suppliers, and others. You'll see that the transport cost, majority of them, 77% of them said that transport cost has increased substantially. Why so? Because public transport was not allowed because of the restriction measures. So they had to either have some personal vehicle, or they have to hire a complete vehicle. So that actually increased the volume, the cost of transport, as well as increase in the fuel price also added to the burden. So that's why there is a high increase in the transport cost. Cost of things like rent or utility bills, that remained mostly same. However, that remained a fixed cost. Even at the time when the business was not operating, or they were not having any other source of income, the cost of rent and the utility bills remained same, and they had to pay it. That became a very big challenge for a lot of MSCs. And we have also seen the cost of supplies has also increased for around 44%. because the high turnaround time, that was a major concern, because as I told before, that the suppliers were not in a position to provide them supplies in quick demand. So the high turnaround time was a major issue for the loss of business as well as increase in cost. And regarding the bill payment, also many enterprises reported that they have made an annual payment for the rent after the pandemic hit, and some of them also had to borrow money to pay back their rent. So these are some of these major challenges that they face. Now, the risk, when we ask which kind of risk that they face most, so one is of course closure of business that they feared, or a huge drop in their revenue because of the reasons we already discussed. And also there was this high risk of business failure. The business could have completely shut down. So that was another challenge that they have mentioned. And around 28% of them mentioned that there was also challenges of like security risk because of that little deterioration in the law and order situation during this restrictions period. So they feared about theft and fraud. So that was another challenge that they mentioned. And 13% mentioned about failing to pay fees and taxes. Another very important insight that came was 17% of these MSEs, they feared loss of their reputation. How so? As they were not getting the desired supply and raw material on time, and because of the price issues. So they also had to make some compromise with the quality of the products and services that they delivered. So because they did not have any other options, and so they had to sell deteriorated quality of products and services. And that was another major reason for which they actually feared loss of their reputation, which can actually in turn lead to business failure or further reduction in their income. They have also taken some actions to mitigate these issues. What are those actions they have taken? They borrowed. They borrowed from friends and relatives, around 28%. They also overborrowed from the already existing credit lines from MFIs and banks. Around 35% have said about this overborrowing from the financial institutions. Some of them say, the majority of them, around 41%, have said that they produced less volume of goods or services. So they stocked less volume of supplies. The manufacturers, they produced less volume so that there is no unsold volume or unsold product left in the stock, in the shop or business. So that was one mitigation strategy. And they also were producing lesser varieties of goods. So they were only keeping those goods or producing those goods and services which were in demand and which most of the people are buying. So they also, to save cost, they reduced the diversity of the products and services that they have. And they also used to keep more non-perishable items so that they do not face a chance of losing products which are perishable in nature. There are only a few of them, only 10% of them reported about reducing number of staff, and 20% reported about increased the price of the goods and services that we already talked before also as the impact of COVID on their business. So till now we talked about what was the impact, and now what are the coping strategies and their demand of finance. We'll talk about that. In terms of coping strategies, there are three major strategies. Tightening their household expenses. Now, when we're talking about coping in terms of coping with the overall business situation as well as overall drop in income. So they were coping at the business front, they were coping at the household front. We already talked about how they are coping at the business front, and here we are also talking about how they were coping at the household front. They utilized all their savings that they had. They reduced their household expenses as much as possible and stick to only the most necessary things. And they used agriculture products as food materials for the family, so that the family so that they have some the food on the plate. They also delayed the bills and the repayment of loans. That was another that was 25% and 22% respectively. Some of them, around 9% only, reported about selling assets, and that also around both productive and non-productive ones. Borrowing money was another strategy that they took to as coping mechanism. Why they were borrowing? They were borrowing to mostly for medical emergencies when something of that sort came, followed by paying rent. You remember that we also talked that they had to borrow money to pay their business premises rent. So this is that, as well as business as well as household rent. Then they were also borrowed to buy food, and for some of them reported about borrowing to pay the school fees of their children. Around 17%, this is important, that they started to do additional job and business also to supplement their already existing source of income from the business. When you ask them whether they are currently in a position to pay their bills, around one third, only one third of them, the 33% says that yes, they can pay all of their bills. Remaining two thirds said that they either do not pay, cannot pay any of the bills, or they can pay only few bills or some of the bills. So this is also an indicative of what was the very critical situation through which these MSCs were going through. If we talk about loans, 62% of MSCs, they took some loan before the pandemic hit. So when the pandemic was there, they had some existing loans, and the average ticket size was around 700,000. From where did they take the loan? From MFIs, the group-based MFI loans, 58%, then commercial banks, and also some individual-based MFI loans as well. And there were, and a few of them, around 1/5 of them also had other sources like BLSS, SACCO, moneylender, family and friends, and local savings rooms like Chama or investment groups or welfare. So these are the different sources of loan that they got. 25% of the respondents that have a running loan, they say, which they had took before the pandemic. And of them, 68% say that they cannot repay the loan. A lot of them, or almost 80% of them, either missed several repayments, or they do not think that they will be able to repay the loan at all. Around one third, close to 40%, 35 to 40% of them were also demanding some change in their existing loan. Either there is a change in interest rate, or there is a change in the grace period, or a loan moratorium, or that overall time of the loan to repay the loan. 53% of the respondents took loan even after the pandemic hit. And another very interesting fact was, and among those, 46% of them have taken loan who did not take any loan ever before. So the pandemic actually forced many of those respondents as well who to take loan who actually never considered taking loan as an option. The median loan ticket size of the loan that they got that they took after the pandemic was around 600,000, a little less than what they took before pandemic. More women than men were actually not in a position to completely repay the loan as of now, and why this loan was taken, for either for the majority of them reported for restocking the business and for working capital, followed by some of them also took it to diversify into other business. 24% of those who took this loan after pandemic could not repay the loan as per the payment terms. So they are either delaying, or they are and they are paying as and when they can. So many of the financial institutions also have put some became lenient to in terms of their loan payment terms and conditions, and that's what was happening. 24% of them could not pay it back as per the loan statute. Now we'll talk about the different segments of MSCs that we have identified. Here are a few quick facts. 35% of the MSCs were not viable. How did we calculate a business not being viable? We took a few parameters to decide that whether the business, whether the MSC owner was not able to pay back the loans that they already had for the last 6 months, or they could not pay most of or none of their bills, or they have laid off their employees, and so these are the few parameters that we have considered to define that a business is not viable, and also if they themselves have stated that they are going to close down their business. And we saw that the proportion of non-viable businesses are marginally higher among women and a little higher in the rural area. Around 19% of the MSCs said that they are no longer viable and they are unable to repay the existing loans. Their existing loans need to be written off, and almost half of them also looking for new loan. And considering the very dire situation that they are in, a soft loan or an unconditional grant will be actually most suitable solution that they could get. And 13% of the MSCs which are still viable and on a recovery path. So they are recovering slowly, some of them quickly, but they are recovering and they are still viable. However, they are not in a position to repay their existing credit. and again almost half of them are looking for new loans. These businesses which are still viable but and in recovering, but they need a substantial reinvestment to go back to the situation that they were before, so that they can recover completely. And there also their existing credit lines are also needs to be reached. Here you will see a more detailed segmentation of the MSEs. Among our total sample, around 52% MSEs said that they need they need loans, some kind of financial loans that they need. Now, this segmentation is of those MSEs who said that they need some financial assistance. Majority of them, 55%, need credit to aid in recovery of their business, with a large proportion of them also need financial assistance. Financial assistance like credit or grant to survival. Now, we know, though you can see 8 different segments, but we can largely make buckets of these 8 segments into 3 large buckets: growth, recovery, and survival. 3% of them are in a growth situation. Segment 1, that is, the business has not suffered harm and they are positioned to access further credit. Then comes the recovery bucket. Here we have 3 segments: segment 2, segment 3, and segment 4. Segment 2, 23% are those businesses which are able to recover and who do not have any outstanding loan, but they need further loan. And segment 3 are the businesses able to recover and prepay existing credit, but they require additional working capital in order to earn out. So if you see this, and so on and so forth. So I will not bore you by reading each of these, but the major criteria, you can get an understanding of this by looking at these 3 major buckets that we have there. Some of them in a growth position, some of them recovering, and some of them are survival. The last 3 segments, segments 6, 7, 8, so their business are not at all viable. So their existing loans, they cannot pay it back, and they are also looking for new loans to survive their business. If you see the graph at the right hand side, so here we have, in the x-axis we have need for financial assistance, and in the y-axis we have likelihood of the loan repayment. So only the segment 1, which has the low need for financial assistance and a high likelihood of loan repayment. They are asking for loans, but they are in a growth trajectory. So they are in a much better situation. Segment 6, 7, and 8 that I was talking about, they are in a need for financial assistance. Their need is very high, but they have very low likelihood of repaying the loans. So they need some kind of support, which will be, say, some kind of soft loan or a one-time grant that they will need. Segment 6, 7, and 8. Then the remaining segments, segment 2, 3, 4, and 5. If we see segment 2, 4, and 5, they also have more or less medium to high likelihood of loan repayment, but their need is very high. And so quite similar for segment 3, but segment 3's need for financial assistance is comparatively lower. If you see the loan demand that they have said, that it is much higher compared to the amount of loan that they took before the pandemic, which was the ticket size was around 700,000 UGX, and what they took after the pandemic, 600,000 UGX. Now it is more than 1 million for most of the segments, and close to 1.4, 1.45, 1.98, 1.2. Only the last 3 segments, segment 6, 7, 8, who actually need some kind of soft loan or grant, their loan demand is comparatively moderate, the ticket size, because they know that they will not be able to repay the loan if the loan size is too large. So what they need is some amount that they can reinvest in their business. So either, and now I will say that some of them are actually looking to revamp their existing business, or some of them are actually trying to start a new business altogether. For example, we have one video store that used to show football matches and videos. So he is actually looking for loans. This is one of the case or from our sample. Who is actually looking for some financial assistance so that he can revamp the whole business, where they can put some extra tables, they can put some refreshment items also, and they can also show football matches where people can come and enjoy. And he was thinking that with this financial assistance, he can actually revamp his business. And some of them were actually, they're like one pharmacy owner, he was actually starting a side business for which they are asking for new loans. So the use might be different. And this is the loan size that they have. Now we will close with the recommendations that we were coming to. So we have 5 different recommendations. First is a grant support, where we are talking about the short-term grant support, which can be a short-term measure to assist the MSEs with the microbusiness grant to provide cash flow support so that they can revive their business. So this is one-time financial assistance without any burden to repay it. Second is subsidized or interest-free credit. This is credit, but soft loans, which is either interest-free or with a very low interest rate, which can be actually channeled to the tier 4 financial institutions, and or so that they can give this low-cost credit. The third is a credit restructure. The existing credit that can be restructured, either rescheduled or there is an extension of the tenure, or they can provide a reduced interest rate or loan splitting, those kind of support. The fourth is the risk sharing and guarantee facility, where in a measure to caution MSEs on the credit facility. It can be in terms of insurance or it can be in terms of guarantee schemes, credit guarantee schemes, where they can get this financial assistance. And last is, so we have actually seen that these are the financial support, of course, is needed, but there are also non-financial supports which can be given, especially those which are in the growth or recovery stage. So these is business advisory. Support MSEs to rethink their business operations, like reinvesting, divesting, capital restructure, adapt for more use cases, etc. And then the financial, so we can actually mentor them and guide them about how to recover fast or how to change their business so that they can reach the pre-COVID situation quickly. And here we try to map these solutions to these different segments. As you can see, the last segment, which are in the most dire situation, that is segment 8. So they need grant support and subsidized free credit. And all the sections which are actually in the survival stage, so they need mostly either subsidized or interest-free credit or a risk-sharing guarantee scheme along with business advisory. Whereas the ones in the growth stage or high in the survival stage, they can, or high in the recovery stage, they can get the risk-sharing scheme as well as the business advisory. So with this mapping, so we will close our presentation, and thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Raul and the team from Microserve Consulting for preparing and bringing to us those highlights of the demand side of the study. I do note that we have questions from participants, those in the house. I would request Raul and team that you stay online because at the end we would like to give everyone else who is in the house or those online a chance to ask questions here and there. Some may be clarifications, some may be questions which are very specific to some of the findings of the study. So please stay online for that session later. And also to the participants, we thought that it helps us save a bit of time if we all have our questions at the very end. So if you look at your programs, we have a Q&A session at the end. So then at that point, we will have all the questions. So please write your question somewhere. For some who are online, you can post it on the Zoom link, chat that has been shared. I think Martin shared with some people who are attending online. For those of us who are in the house, you can write your question somewhere and we'll take them all at the end during the Q&A session. With these few words, I think we can move to the next presentation, which is from MCRIL. It's Sanjay, I think, who is bringing us the presentation. So Sanjay, you're welcome. He's presenting from India. You're welcome, Sanjay.
Thank you, Jimmy. I'll just turn on my video for a moment. Thank you, Jimmy, and good morning to everyone in the room in Kampala, Uganda, and to others based in Nairobi and elsewhere. As Jimmy has explained, the study was undertaken through a demand-side view of the MSEs and through a supply side view of the institutions, the inclusive finance service providers, the SACCOs and MFIs who typically lend to MSEs. So when Microsafe's study shows that a large proportion of the MSEs need additional funding, the question for us was, do the inclusive finance service providers have the money to provide that funding? Let me now share my screen. Yeah. There we are. Can you see my screen? And I'll go to slideshow mode. So ours was a diagnostic study of tier 4 financial institutions, the institutions that typically lend to MSEs. The key questions for us were to undertake a market analysis to understand how the supply of finance to the MSE sector has been impacted by COVID and how it can be kept up, how it can be maintained so that the MSEs that the previous presentation was talking about could receive an adequate supply of finance. What are the options to build on the measures already put in place to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 and to understand the threats and opportunities for that IFSPs face, the inclusive finance service providers, SACCOs and MFIs. What threats and opportunities do they face in addressing the needs of the MSE sector? So how did we undertake the study? Essentially, through a review of portfolios and financial performance of the tier 4 institutions that I've been talking about. Before the pandemic in 2018-19, to the extent that we had information, during the pandemic in 2020-21. The study was undertaken in the second half of 2021, mainly August, September, October. So to some extent, we were able to get data up to June 21, but that is where our information stops. That was supported by discussions with managements of a number of these service providers to understand their perspective on the challenges that they face, the challenges that the pandemic has posed for them and how they coped with the pandemic and what they need in the future to serve the needs of MSEs in Uganda. Well, the IFSPs may have faced a challenge, but we faced a challenge too. And our main challenge was the availability of data on portfolio and financial performance. We inevitably, we contacted many of the IFSPs, but we only got responses from 4 or 5 out of about 70 or 80 that we contacted. And then, of course, we had to persuade those that we were able to get data from to talk to us about their performance. Of course, we didn't rely just on direct feedback. We also got data. We looked at other sources, Bank of Uganda, Profira, the association, AMFIU. But most Bank of Uganda and Profira have information on IFSPs, but it is incomplete from our perspective because we needed data at a fairly high level of detail. So that kind of information was only available from AMFIU. But even in the case of AMFIU, you can see we were only able to get data from 41 IFSPs. You can see in the table, 30 SACCOs, 11 MFIs. We're very grateful, by the way, to AMFIU for giving us access to that data. But ultimately, I have to say that the numbers were lower than we would have liked. This may be because of reporting issues. I think reporting to AMFU is voluntary, and the sense I get is that it's only those who feel confident of their operations who actually report to AMFU. Anyway, we had a sample of 41 IFSPs. We held management discussions with 8 of them. And the outreach of these IFSPs to borrowers, mainly MSE borrowers, was 220,000. And the members of those institutions, the savers with those institutions, amount to about 300. The significance of these numbers will become clear later in the presentation. Rather like MSC in categorizing the micro and small enterprises, when we were looking at the service providers, we also categorized them. And we used a similar framework because I think the terms of reference had some similarities. But we have 5 categories. The best, number 1, they find financing of enterprises viable, and the institution itself is flourishing. You can see there the criteria that we used: high return on equity, PAR 30 less than 8% for SACCOs and less than 5% for MFIs. Financing of the second category, still find financing of enterprises viable, but need fresh working capital. Number 3, also their performance is not bad. They find the financing of MSEs viable, but their recovery from the effects of the pandemic will be long-term. So, they need significant support. Then we get to numbers 4 and 5. Number 4 are okay financing enterprises, but are probably not viable as institutions themselves. That's what we mean by commercial earnout infeasible, meaning you can work with them, you can provide them with more capital over a period of time, but we were not sure, based on the numbers, whether these would be viable institutions. You can see their returns on equity over the past couple of years, they're barely just above break even, and PAR 30 is very high. Basically, that should read greater than 40%, not less than. And then there's the 5th category, who are effectively the write-offs. As a result of the pandemic, they have registered high losses and are in a situation of negative equity, meaning their investors, their sponsors' capital has been completely wiped out. And they're basically, to the extent that they're continuing operations, it's on depositors' funds, which is not a very satisfactory situation. So here you get the distribution of the MSEs across categories. Out of 30 SACCOs, 70% are in categories 1, 2, and 3, which means 21. And MFIs, out of the 11 MFIs that we were able to get detailed information for, 10 are in categories 1, 2, and 3, and 1 is in category 5, which is what I would call the write-off category. What we did was, and these are the other 2 columns in the table, was to get numbers on the known universe for SACCOs. The known universe that we were able to get numbers on was 133 SACCOs operating in Uganda and about 50 MFIs. And using the proportions from our sample, we distributed the known universe by number in columns 3 and 5. The use of these numbers distributed across the known universe, you will see in the next few slides. But first, the performance of the sample. You can see here the portfolio quality performance arranged by the type of institution as we have categorized it. Category 1 on the left, category 4 and 5 on the right in both of these. Category 5 actually have been left out of this because their portfolios at risk were extremely high. You can see that category 1 institutions in 2019, their portfolio at risk was below 5%. 2020, because of the pandemic, it rises to 8.5%. For category 2, just about 10% before the pandemic, rises to 18.3 because of the pandemic. Category 3 being institutions that need considerable working capital inputs. These are institutions that were doing reasonably well before the pandemic in 2019. But in 2020, because of very high portfolios at risk, you can see 36.6%, they became shaky in terms of their own financial performance. And that's why they're in category 3. Category 4, as I said earlier, is a marginal category, and possibly these institutions would not deserve significant support, or maybe I should say maybe deserve isn't the right term, but that pouring money into those institutions may not be so useful. And similarly for the NFIs on the right. Profitability of the SACCOs, you can see category 1 profitability is high, and it goes down as you go to categories 2 and 3. And category 4 profitability was high in 2019, but is negative in 2020. Again, because of very high portfolios at risk, because of very high provisioning requirements, resulting in their profitability taking a major hit. Category 5, of course, are the ones that it's not worth working with, because they were loss-making institutions before the pandemic and continued to be during the pandemic. This was on SACCOs, this is on MFIs, very similar pattern. We got return on assets and return on equity here. Not very much difference between those. So the issue with portfolio quality numbers is always whether they are being correctly reported. This was something that we looked at very closely in our study. Has the portfolio quality been masked? A quick way of checking that is to look at the yield. If you have the declared effective interest rate, meaning the APR of the loan, and then you match that with the yield. If the yield is 10% below the effective interest rate, then you would expect the portfolio at risk to be around 10%. Let's say 8% portfolio at risk would translate to yields being about 10% below the effective interest rate. Okay, but then the effective interest rate should be correctly reported as well. So it has to be inclusive of fees along with the headline interest rate, because the yield includes both effective interest, both the interest earnings and earnings from fees. Okay. We found that there was not a substantial difference between the APR, APR minus portfolio at risk, and yield. So we didn't feel that there had been much masking of the portfolio quality. But there are other issues. Has the accounting for income, meaning has the yield been correctly calculated? Is the income being accounted on a cash basis or on an accrued interest basis? If you account for interest on an accrued interest basis, then what you can do, if you were so inclined, would be all your overdue loans. You could say, oh, those loans will come back. So let's just include the interest that is due on those loans in the income of the institution. Obviously, that is something that works when everything is going smoothly, when the economy is running well. When the economy is not running well, as in the time of COVID, if you account on the accrued interest basis, what you'll be doing is showing much higher income, meaning your yield will be much higher than it will turn out to be in the long run. So from a management perspective, it's actually better to account on a cash basis. Here also, we were actually surprised to find that a significant number of institutions were accounting on a cash basis. And therefore, again, we felt reasonably comfortable that the feedback we were getting was on yield was reasonably good. Then there's the issue of rescheduled loans. Are they included in overdues or not? Here we got mixed feedback, and that's where there could be some problem in our numbers. Because if you include rescheduled loans in on-time portfolio, then you are underreporting your portfolio quality, meaning the portfolio quality numbers would be better than they actually are. So this one we're a little concerned about, but the other two, the masking of the effective interest rate and accounting for income, seem to be a lot better than we expected. So now you've got a certain number of MSCs in Uganda. They are going to come out of the pandemic, and they are going to be hungry for capital. We're going to have to finance them. Where is that money going to come from? Are the functioning inclusive finance service providers strong enough? Do they have enough money? What we've done in this table is to let's look at category 1 first. So if the growth rate is 20%, will their liquidity be adequate to meet the demand with a 20% growth rate, which means their portfolio size will grow by 20%, and maybe for 20% portfolio size, they'll be serving maybe 5% more enterprises. So we've taken that, we've increased the stress, as you can see, from 20% to 40% to 60% to 80%, and then to 140, because these are the best institutions you have. So ideally, they should be serving the largest numbers of enterprises. And to what extent can they grow in the year after the pandemic and still be able to take the stress of operations and so on? Using our experience internationally and looking at the liquidity of these institutions in some detail, we have a detailed Excel sheets on this. We were able to say that these institutions, on average, would be able to grow by 140%. Here, if you allow for an increase in loan size by 20, 30, 40%, and increase in numbers of MSCs served, effectively what you're saying is that they can double the number of MSCs they serve. For category 2, the stress is manageable up to 90% growth, but not beyond. So, I would say larger loan sizes and about 60% more enterprises served. category 3, the numbers are lower. That 80 in red means at 80%, these institutions, at 80% growth of portfolio, these institutions would probably not be able to take the strain. We should have shown a 60% figure here, because that's roughly the limit for category 3 institutions. Category 4, you can see, can't take any strain. They need substantial support, both in terms of equity and in terms of borrowing, in order to meet the needs of enterprises that they serve. The analysis here ensures that all the normal requirements of MFIs, liquidity, always having a 10% cash buffer. So when we say category 3 will not have adequate liquidity if they have 80% growth, even if substantial sums are available to them as debt, it means that this is after allowing for a cash buffer of 10%. So translating from that table into this one, we looked at the borrowing requirements. So you take the average borrowing requirement of category 1, you multiply by the number of IFSPs in category 1, and you multiply by the amount that they need to borrow to reach the maximum level of growth, because we're trying to serve the largest number possible of MSEs. And in the case of category 1, actually, we found that they didn't need a substantial amount of additional borrowing. But just to be sure that we weren't harming their liquidity, what we did was we took 25% of their incremental disbursements as their borrowing requirement. That borrowing requirement goes up as you go to categories 2 and 3. You see 50% of incremental disbursements for category 3. And in the case of category 4, you need equity as well. And translating that, you're using the numbers from the demand side study, translating the size of portfolios into numbers of MSEs served. Those are these numbers here. So categories 1 and 3 would serve about 950,000 enterprises. Category 4, 63,000, for a total just in excess of 1 million enterprises served. Now this relates to an estimated 3.2 million micro and small enterprises in Uganda, to be served actually not just by IFSPs, but by other institutions as well. And of course, by the usual method of funding such small enterprises, as the previous presentation showed, family and friends, borrowing, trade credit, and so on. But to supplement that, we have the IFSPs able, if sufficient funding is available to them, IFSPs able to serve about 1 million enterprises. The additional funding that needs to be made available to them is of the order of $59 million, which would enable roughly 1/3 of the estimated 3.2 million MSEs to be served. More details of the funding that would be needed. In the first, in column 2 there, you see the proportion of all MSEs that will be served in the proportion of MSEs in various categories in the demand side report, number of MSEs that need to be financially supported, about 1.63 million, and the final column there shows the funding which is required by those MSEs, calculated from numbers in the demand side report. It comes to close to 2 trillion Uganda shillings. This estimate is a close match with our calculation from the supply side of what the MSAs need based on the growth that we calculated for categories 1 to 4 MSCs. So the external support that is needed is of the order of 2.1 billion, 210 billion Uganda shillings, or $59 million. Sources of funds, this actually was a little bit of a surprise when we were talking to the institutions themselves. Many of them said that we have a good, a solid base of members, and we have maintained, in fact, the numbers for these institutions. They've maintained a reasonable growth of 9% in their deposits, even during the pandemic. So the expectation that member deposits will continue to fund their operations, or at least will continue to provide supplementary funding to their operations, is not an inappropriate one. Apart from that, their actual shareholders, they have made requests to their member shareholders to increase their contributions, and a surprising level of optimism that significant additional funds will be available. There are also wholesale lenders operating in the open market, the Microfinance Support Center, Salutary Finance, and the Agribusiness Initiative that we will be hearing from shortly. They've been mentioned multiple times as supporters of IFSPs, and it's expected that those first three sources will provide a significant proportion of the money that's needed. Wholesale lenders, Rabobank, Credit Agricole, Symbiotics, who are active in the Uganda market, will supplement this. And then there is still some funding gap, but FSDU, when we undertook this, by the time we concluded the study, FSDU was talking of some discussions that they were having with funders, and possibly a $25 million liquidity support facility would become available. Our assessment is that given the sources 1 to 4, an additional $25 million would be sufficient to meet the needs of IFSPs operating in Uganda. This is all on the assumption that the economy in Uganda recovers to fairly closely to the 2019 level in 2022, or certainly by the middle of 2023. So those are our findings. This is about MQuIL and what we do. Thank you very much for the opportunity to participate in this study, and I look forward to any discussions that the audience may like to have.
Thank you very much, Sanjay, for the presentation, which gave us some insights from the side of the IFSPs and the gap that is there, the gap to be able to meet the financing demands for recovery. So with this presentation, I think we can move on to the next item in our program, and that is to hear from the side of FSDU what is in the pot, what has been cooking, and what are some of those initiatives, like response initiatives, that should lead us to capitalize on that, the resilience that the both demand and supply sides have shown, but also perhaps respond to the gap that has been highlighted. So at this juncture, then I would like to welcome Joseph, who is the Director of Programs for Financial Sector Deepening Uganda, and also the Acting Executive Director. Joseph, you're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. I'll try and be quick so that we can have sufficient time to dive into the discussions. Can you put up the presentation, please? My responsibility here is just to see how we can be able to build back better. And we have a few thoughts in terms of how we can be able to do that through leveraging technology as well as taking a value chain approach. And this is why we think that that can be able to help us build more resilience so that but when the next shock happens, we'll be able to have better results than what we've seen in the two presentations before. Next slide. For my experience, for that to happen, we think that we need to think beyond finance. In the past, we've thought that if we can be able to provide access to finance, be able to get the smallholder farmers, the MSMEs, enough capital, then hopefully maybe we can be able to get them growing and be able to become more resilient. But from my experience, we realize that it takes more than having a bank account. It takes more than having sufficient supply of credit for you to be able to be sustainable, to achieve sustainable growth, or even achieve resilience. Because of some of those points that I've listed there, one, most of these players that we're looking at, even what we've seen in the studies, are very small. They have small production capacity, they have limited or no savings at all, and if they are to borrow, their ticket sizes are very small. I usually tell people, imagine you're a banker seated on the other side, and you have to attend to 1,000 smallholder farmers, and each one of them is just borrowing maybe 10K, 20K, 50K. Eh? And yet they all have to fill in all those KYC documents, paperwork. So you can imagine by the time you get to the 1,000 person, you probably have run out of energy. But the commission you're getting on that, the fees you're getting on that, is nothing to write home about. It probably won't even pay the salaries or cover the costs of just one staff of that branch. And compare with dealing with one corporate big guy who's probably bringing in 10 billion, they won't probably even step into the banking hall. But imagine how much commission you make from that, how much interest you make on that, and how much it can actually cover your costs, and how much time it takes you to attend to that. So you find that no wonder most of the big boys, or most people, most banks, or most commercial banks won't even want to touch the small guys. Or if they're to touch them, these small guys will have to pay exorbitantly high interest rates, and for loans or products that cover really short time. No wonder you find that on average they're taking out 700K, but even that 700K they have to pay it back in not more than 30 days, or at most 60 days. Now, what can you do with 700K which you've borrowed for 30 days or 60 days? The most it can do is just to keep you surviving. So meaning that when the next pandemic comes or the next shock comes, you'll still go through the same cycle. The other reason why it's so difficult to serve these guys, their incomes are very unpredictable. So meaning that your models that you use to project cash flows, you use to project risk, they will almost be unusable, because these people's incomes, or this segment's incomes, are seasonal and irregular. The other interesting thing about them is they have limited or no capacity to scale or growth. Meaning that if you're thinking of growing your loan book, you think of growing your income, growing your revenues, there's nothing much you can get from this, because they almost remain the same. They'll probably be borrowing the same amount of money year in, year out. So there is no potential for growth. Largely because their visions are limited to meeting the subsistence needs, whether at business level or at household level. And because of those various issues I've raised above, they are highly susceptible to social and economic shocks. If someone got sick, if we had a shock like the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns, they can hardly survive, and therefore the land performing loans will shoot into the roof like we have seen. So that means that they're very risky, but also they're heavily reliant on cash. They're highly informal. They are not only digitally illiterate, but they're also financially illiterate, meaning that they're very difficult to deal with. You have to spend a lot of time explaining how your products work for you to even get the bare minimum of 100K from them. So with all those things, it becomes very difficult to serve these guys the way they are. And that's why you think a value chain approach could probably solve that puzzle. Of course, you could probably wait and hope that these small businesses will hit a jackpot and become big and you're able to serve them. But with all the different economic constraints, social constraints that we have in economies like Uganda, it will probably take a minimum of 20 years from someone to move from small to medium business for you to be able to serve them well. By that time, probably you'll have run out of business as a financial institution, and therefore it becomes very, very difficult to even think about these guys because there's no really... So then how can you be able to get value out of these small guys? How can you be able to transform them into viable economic business units that financial institutions can be able to look at? We think that a value chain approach, where you don't look at them as individuals, but you look at them as a value chain. So what that means is that instantly you have transformed them from small players into big players. Because then I'm no longer looking at that smallholder farmer in their own capacity, but I'm looking at that smallholder farmer as a supplier of, maybe I'm giving an example, Mukwano Industries. Instantly, I'm not just looking at the potential of the smallholder farmer, but I'm actually looking at the potential of the off-taker or the different other actors in the value chain that rely on that smallholder farmer for them to survive or for them to thrive. Meaning that as the big guys grow, even the small guys grow, and therefore you'll have solved the problem of scaling and growth, which was not there before if you're looking at them as individual units. The other thing that comes with the value chain approach is the economies of scope. Economies of scale makes it possible for you to scale and grow, because then as a small guy, you're able to tap into the big value chains, you're able to tap into the big opportunities, growth opportunities of the big players down the value chain. But beyond that, because the value chain approach brings together all the different actors in the value chain, then instantly you're not only looking at just a smallholder farmer as a customer, but you're looking at the suppliers of inputs. If it is traders, you're looking at the suppliers within the supply chain. All those are different actors that need finance, and together they can grow and provide a lot of business opportunities for the financial institution. Of course, the other thing that the value chain approach does is that it reduces risks, because then the risk of the smallholder farmer is not only diversified across the different actors in the value chain, but it is also reduced, because then the risk can be transferred across the different actors in the value chain. Because it's in the interest of the off-taker to ensure that the farmer is protected against shocks, because if they're not protected against shocks, then the supply chain will be disrupted. So it's in their interest that they actually make the farmer more productive, or the trader or the supplier down the value chain more productive, so that then as the big guys grow, even the small guys become better, they're able to go and scale. In that way, you're transferring risk across the value chain. But then one would ask, with all those different players, how do you bring them together? Of course, that has always been a challenge. Coordinating and bringing all these guys together, coordinating 1,000 farmers to be able to think in the same way, to be able to produce the same quality, to be able to meet your targets of the tons that you need, whether it is agriculture or trade. That is a humongous task. And that's why we think technology becomes very critical, because it connects the dots, but also it brings, just go to the next slides, but it also brings a lot of efficiency gains that even increase much more the possibilities of productivity as well as affordability of financial services. But also with all the emerging technologies around how you can harness data to increase productivity, technology makes it possible for that to happen. So then how do we put all these things together? Why are they not happening? Because we've had a lot of initiatives around value chain finance. Increasingly, we are seeing a lot of platforms trying to bring together all the different players. Now we think that these are some of the things that we need to figure out and crack and address for us to realize not only the value that comes with the value chain approach, but also the value that comes with leveraging technology to get the most out of the value chain approach. And one of the things we think that we need to build capacity of value chain finance within the financial institutions. And this is one of the areas what we're thinking to explore over the next 5 years. Most of the products we have in our financial institutions are plain vanilla products that look at the customer as an individual unit, not as a value chain or an ecosystem. Because like we've seen in the earlier slides, when you begin to look at the customer within the broader value chain or ecosystem, the business opportunities tremendously change, the risk that you attach to them tremendously change, and opportunities of growth become tremendous. So we need to change that dimension within financial institutions, so to begin to look at, especially for the bottom of the pyramid, or even we could say the missing middle. If you begin to look at value chain, then what previously were considered to be neglected segments, instantly they become valuable segments. Because have you ever wondered where we get food? And every other day, you don't miss breakfast, you don't miss lunch. Whenever you come here, you always find bacon, you always find katogo. That katogo comes from a smallholder farmer. But have you ever known why, if it comes from a smallholder farmer, then why does that smallholder farmer fail to get capital? That means there's something missing. There's a mismatch between the opportunities that this smallholder farmer presents or the small trader presents and the lack of capital that they find. Of course, the other thing why it is very difficult for some of these value chains initiatives or value chain approach to happen is you don't have a lot of value added services beyond the basics. Because like we say that for someone to be economically active, for someone to be economically productive, there's a whole range of other things that they need for them to be able to make the most of their production. So if the farmer is going to be able to produce the yields that are expected, then there are a lot of other support services within the value chain that need to be provided for them to be able to benefit, for you to be able to benefit from that. And the beauty with technology is that all that can actually be provided on one platform, which previously was not possible without technology. Because that same platform, while it provides extension services to improve productivity, the same platform can provide payment services to enable the farmer be able to send and move money across different actors. The same platform can actually be used for the farmer to be able to finance education for their kids, to be able to save, to be able to borrow money, and to be able to do a lot of other things from the comfort of their farms or from the comfort of their homes, which previously was not possible. But for that to happen, you need to have sustainable and rewarding strategic partnerships. How do you bring together all the different actors, whether it's off-takers, whether it's exporters, whether it's different guys in the different players in the value chain, whether it's education service providers, whether it's merchant payment services providers? How do you bring all those guys together so that you can have a viable and sustainable business model? And that's where strategic partnerships becomes very critical, for you to be able to bring all these guys together on this platform, and each one of them is able to get a big pie or a portion of the pie, and as the pie becomes bigger, even the portion for every actor on that platform becomes bigger. But that requires a lot of work in terms of building those partnerships and ensuring that they are sustainable. And then, of course, the other critical thing is, just to go back to the previous slide, is because most of our people have not yet warmed up to digital, the previous slide, have not warmed up to digital solutions. Most of them don't have mobile phones. The most they can use their mobile phones is making a call. So we still have a long way to go in terms of having self-sustainable and self-serving digital solutions where someone is able to make a transaction from the beginning to end without needing assistance. So in the short to medium term, you will still need a robust and extensive agent network that will be able to mobilize and support not only smallholder farmers, but MSMEs. They actually need support, you know? I think it's Jumia, I read somewhere that initially when they came to these markets, they thought that the retail traders that they're working with to supply the goods on their platform automatically will just get into their smartphones and they will just download the app and they begin straight away using the app and using all the other functionalities until they realized that nothing was happening on the platform. And then they had to deploy vast number of agents to actually go physically sit with these guys in their shops, retail shops, wherever they are, sit down with them, help them download the app, help them go through the app, use the app, work with them for a minimum number of months until they got used to these tools and gadgets. So you need that robust and extensive agent network to begin to get these people to move to the platform economy, because that's where the future is. Because you cannot be able to bring all these things together in one place and harness economies of scale and economies of scope without technology. So you need this agent network to be able to bring the smallholder guys, the MSMEs into the digital economy, to support them to be able to make that journey and make that transition from cash to the digital economy. Now, one other thing that is critical, and that's the next slide, is we also need a vibrant and developed cooperative economy. I just gave a few examples of a few players who are trying to move in that direction. So long as the border guy remains a single border guy, he will always be very difficult to serve. Because the most they can make in a month is probably 100K. And even if you give them a digital loan, because it's limited and only comes in small doses of 30 days, there's not so much they can be able to do. So the most they can do is to take out a digital loan to be able to buy their motorbike, but probably they will never grow beyond that motorbike. So that means that they will always be stuck in the bottom of the pyramid until you're able to get them to form an association or a cooperative, and then instantly you have 1,000 riders who have come together and they can now be able to take on big tenders, where, for instance, they can take on a tender to do the logistics for maybe a restaurant which has a chain of outlets across the country, and they want to do home delivery or physical delivery. In that instant, that cooperative, because now it's a corporate entity, they can now sit on the table and negotiate and say, we have 1,000 riders across the country, and we can be able to distribute either letters or goods, or whatever it is, across the country. In that instant, you moved from an economy of value of 100K, and you're talking about 100, maybe 10 billion, a billion shillings in terms of what you can be able to do. And when you bring that down to each of the members, it is way much more than 100K. Because that tender and that at level, you're not only able to make 1 billion, but actually you can improve and grow your capacity beyond just having one client with maybe 100 outlets to probably having 2 or 3 or 4 clients or 5 clients with probably 500 outlets. Now, when you bring it down to each of the individual members, the actual income they're actually getting is far much more than they're actually getting when they were individuals. That, of course, will require a lot of mind shift change from operating as an individual to operating as a collective unit, more progressive with the capacity to scale and grow. And that is an economy that can easily plug into a value chain approach. It's an economy that can easily plug into the platform economy. We can move to the next slide. Just before that, just go back. Yes. Now we've seen that the platform economy not only brings together all these different players, is able to build these strategic partnerships, but it is also able to generate a lot of data, which presents a lot of opportunities and information that previously was not known, because currently you're operating in a dark economy, because we don't know what opportunities lie ahead. We don't know what opportunities are next year or next year to me. Now, what this does is that then you're able to generate a lot of data in real time, which you can then be able to harness to catalyze and stimulate innovation as well as creativity. So the next 2 slides, I won't really go too much into them, but they're just really showing you an illustration of a variety of partnerships and opportunities that lie in the platform economy and in a value chain approach. Of course, those are many pieces that grow over time, but if we begin on that journey, 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, we could have a totally different outlook. People no longer be riding border borders as individuals, but they'll be riding border borders as a part of a bigger logistic economy, as a part of a bigger logistic value chain, which has tremendous opportunities, and opportunities not only for financing, but for growth and productivity. So we think that as we begin to discuss and explore opportunities, then I think we'll have begun solving the puzzle of addressing the bottom of the pyramid and addressing the resilience and sustainability of some of these small players. But so long as they continue to operate as individual units, they will always remain at the bottom of the pyramids. And the most they can do is provide opportunities for the big players to earn money. Because a digital lender who is serving 1 million small guys, he stands to gain more than the small guys, because the small guys will always be limited in terms of how much they can get in terms of borrowing. But the big player who is serving them will be getting a lot of fees, because they'll be charging each of those 1 million guys fees. Even if they charge 10,000 shillings, it will be far much more in terms of revenue. But that person will always remain at the 10,000 level, meaning that they'll always be stuck at the bottom of the pyramid. So until we bring them together and harness their collective value, we will not be able to see the resilience and sustainability that we are looking for. So those are some of the things that we hope over the next 5 years we'll begin to engage the industry and to see how together we can then be able to start piloting and testing some of these ideas and to see how much they can take us in solving the puzzle of the bottom of the pyramid. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Joseph, for the insights around how do we build on the resilience of the MSME sector, but also the resilience of the financial institutions that serve them, giving them access to financial services. I would like to pick on from the aspect of strategic partnerships and opportunities. And as I mentioned earlier from the beginning, one of the studies, the one that Sanjay was presenting to us that highlights those gaps, was done through a partnership between Financial Sector Development in Uganda and ABI. And it's at this point that I would like to welcome a representative of ABI to also talk to us about what are some of the thoughts or insights about the initiatives that is cooking on the side of ABI. Thank you very much, Irene.
Yes, good morning again, everyone. Yeah, I'm Irene Sekamwa, and I work with ABI Finance Holdings, and I'm representing the CEO, who sends her apologies as she's not able to be with us today. Just to give you a small brief about ABI, ABI stands for Agribusiness Initiative, and it's a social enterprise founded by the governments of Denmark in Uganda way back in 2010. It's a conduit through which development partners and investors can build private sector agribusiness development. It's comprised of two separate companies, ABI Development, formerly called ABI Trust, which most of you know very well, and ABI Finance Holdings. So for purposes of this workshop, I will concentrate on ABI Finance Holdings, which company I work for. So ABI Finance offers liquidity, collateral support, and technical assistance through lines of credit, agricultural guarantees, and concessional financing to financial service providers ranging from the regulated entities to the non-regulated entities. That is from the tiers 1 to 4. So back to the discussion question. What is ABI Finance doing to revitalize the Tier 4 sector post-COVID-19? Yeah, in response to COVID-19 and in order to mitigate the economic impacts of the pandemic, we offered concessions to support our partners' stability and recovery, to minimize business disruption and ensure business continuity. For example, under our lines of credit, we offered a moratorium of 12 months loan repayment, meaning that all our partner financial institutions were offered 12 months non-repayment on both principal and interest. This was intended to support their liquidity base to recover from the impacts of COVID-19. We also reduced our interest rates by about 5 percentage points from an average of about 13 to the lowest we could go, which was about 8%. And this was also in bid to support institutions have some working capital stability at their end. In turn, we also requested our partner financial institutions to pass on these concessions to their clients. And we saw this with a number of circles, which demonstrated a reduction in their interest rates, some reducing from 3% per month to 2% per month. We also offered COVID relief short-term working capital that was intended to refinance struggling institutions that had been affected by COVID-19. And most of these institutions were lending to smallholder farmers, which category generally has small working capital. So as most businesses were closed during the pandemic, most of the farmers consumed part or all their capital and therefore needed to be refinanced in order to start again. So we offered this short-term relief working capital at about 8% interest rates and was to be paid within 12 months. Yeah, we also have an agricultural loan guarantee product that where we normally share the risk on defaulted loan principal in the ratio of 50 to 50. And we also charge an annual utilization fee of 1%. So during COVID, we had to remove this utilization fee completely, and we also increased our risk share from 50% to 70% of the defaulted amount of principal on agricultural portfolio, while the financial institutions bared only 30% and not 50% as was the case. And all this we did in bid to revitalize the agribusiness sector and provide working capital. So all those concessions were offered for a period of 1 year, but extended on a case-by-case basis, as was requested by some financial institutions. So number two, in order to stimulate the restart of the economy post-COVID-19, Stanbic Bank, by virtue of their convening power, syndicated a fund called the Economic Enterprise Restart Fund. And in that regard, we are partnering with Stanbic Bank under the following areas. To ensure availability of affordable cost of funds, we have provided a line of credit initially worth Uganda shillings 20 billion through Stanbic Bank at a concessional rate of 5% to on-lend to mainly SACCOs and microfinance institutions at a rate of 10%. And we are also expecting Stanbic, these SACCOs and MFIs, to pass on these concessions to the agribusiness clients. So this line of credit has 6 months grace period and is intended to revitalize agribusinesses. So our end beneficiaries in ABI, our keywords are smallholder farmers and agribusinesses. And in order to be able to reach each one of them, this facility is offered through the SACCOs and MFIs from Stanbic Bank. And of recent, as many of you can see, Stanbic Bank is really out there, to inform all those SACCOs and MFIs about this product. So secondly, in order to also stimulate Stanbic's appetite in lending to the agribusiness sector through the SACCOs and MFIs, we have also provided a guarantee cover of up to Uganda shillings 20 billion through Stanbic Bank, but with the possibility of increasing it to Uganda shillings 45 billion, and this will be in respect of loans advanced for agribusiness purposes by Stanbic Bank through the SACCOs and MFIs. And in this regard, ABI will take up a risk share of 50% on the defaulted loan principal. Of course, after proving that all reasonable collection efforts have been diligently pursued against the defaulting borrowers in accordance with the recovery laws and standards in Uganda. So due to the fact that the institutions that were digitized proved more resilient during the pandemic when movement was curtailed, ABI is committed to encouraging our partners and financial service institutions use digital channels to effect their operations and also deliver financial services. So in that regard, we have also provided another grant of Uganda shillings 2 billion, still through that Economic Enterprise Restart Fund managed by Stanbic Bank, meant for digitization of SACCOs and MFIs in the different regions in Uganda. With this initial 2 billion grant for digitization, we are hoping that about 60 SACCOs can be digitized. 40 maybe to 60 or 70. And with digitization, we are confident that financial service delivery will be very efficient, especially in rural areas, and outreach to those people in far areas can actually also access financial services. Furthermore, in order to ensure increased outreach and seamless financial service delivery to rural areas, we also continue to partner with apex bodies or umbrella organizations that have an affiliation to Tier 4 institutions. For example, recently, we partnered with Uganda Central Cooperative Financial Services, that is UCAFS, and have approved a grant of 3.9 billion, also meant for digitization of 100 SACCOs. Out there are so many SACCOs that are still not digitized or not fully digitized. Some of them just have MIS systems but don't even have mobile banking. And we witnessed this when many of our partners' clients could not pay loans because they did not have mobile banking. So this grant is made for digitizing SACCOs, building capacity in digital and financial literacy to ensure that clients out there appreciate the benefits of using digitization to effect financial services. We noticed that there's still a lot of phobia in rural areas when it comes to using digital financial services. Even among us here, there are many of us, you fear to use online banking because you are not certain whether some hacker out there will get access to your PIN. And in the SACCOs, we saw this, that even after putting in place some digitization platforms, when clients transact, they would rush to the SACCO lineup to just find out whether what they've done on their phone actually reflects at the SACCO. So that phobia still exists, and digital literacy is very critical so that clients can appreciate the benefits and can transact from anywhere conveniently and at an affordable cost. So this grant to UCAFS also is supporting the setup of a digital platform through which SACCOs can transact conveniently. So with those COVID response strategies and innovations, we hope we can reach out to and grow more our smallholder farmers and agribusinesses. We are still open to innovation, and for any of us who may have innovations that can mitigate the impacts of COVID-19, you can always approach our offices and we discuss. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I believe that you have been writing down some of the questions concerning from where we started from up to this point, from the first presentation, second presentation, insights from FSDU and insights from ABI Finance Holding. It's about the right time now that we would like to respond to the questions that you may be having, those the ones that you are writing. And for that, I would like to welcome Caroline, who is the Intervention Manager for MSME Finance at FSDU. The matters related to MSME financing are very much within her docket, and I think she is the right person to be able to pick some of the questions you have and channel them to the respective persons that you may want to clarify on the questions you're having. Could be clarifications, could be, yeah, some may be technical relating to the studies. So Carol, you're welcome.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. Good morning to you all. Caroline is my name, as said by Jimmy. Privileged to take you through the next session, the Q&A, where we have a deep dive into the discussions that we've had from all the previous presenters. So for the team in the room, feel free, by show of hands, you can be able to ask your question directly. The team online, please insert your questions on the chat box, and our digital team will be able to pick them up. It can be a comment, a question, clarification, an appreciation. Don't leave without asking that question. But I can start off with a question. I think Arnold from the MasterCard Foundation would like to know the geographic and demographic distribution of the studies. Our consultants, I hope you're still online, to guide us through, both for the demand study and the supply side study. If we can start with that. Relatedly, as Sanjay, you prepare to respond to that, you can also take this question. You mentioned that there is a challenge on data on the portfolio and financial performance. It would be good to know what are your recommendations to this challenge, especially to the Tier 4 organizations. If you're still online, kindly take those questions as the audience prepares to ask more questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. You have asked me to address two questions. One is the a spread of the study. Essentially, it was limited by the availability of data from the inclusive finance service providers. But we did manage to establish where those IFSPs work. And I'm happy to say that mostly it is a representative sample of such institutions functioning in the country. More in central and western Uganda, a smaller number in north and east, but I think that is the sort of distribution that there is in Uganda anyway, of such institutions. The demographic is something that the demand side study will, the study team for the demand side study will need to address. The data challenge, what is my recommendation? AmFIU has a voluntary reporting system. It's not even clear to me whether all the inclusive finance service providers are actually members of AmFIU. So the first step would be to ensure that a larger proportion of the operating IFSPs become members of AmFIU. And then, of course, all members should be required to report. Normally, this does not happen on a voluntary basis. So it's only when the managements of these financial service providers start to see some benefit in reporting that the reporting will start to happen. So when funders approach AmFIU for their information and SACO managements or MFI managements realize that if their data is not with AmFIU, that if their data is not with AmFIU, they will probably be left out of any support that becomes available. You need some sort of carrot and stick system to ensure that data is reported so that it can be used by studies of this sort for the benefit of the whole sector. It's not that, why should I give my data to AmFIU? It will only lead to my being blacklisted because my data is not looking good. It should be, if you don't report your data, you probably will not be eligible for support. And if you do report your data, it's for the benefit of the whole sector as well as for your individual institution. Thank you. That's what I have to say on the data challenge.
Thank you, Sanjay. Thank you for that elaborate response. Do we have any comments from the Microsoft team?
Hi, everyone. So we collected the data across 32 districts for the quantitative research across 32 districts in North, East, Central, and the South section regions of the country. And in terms of in all the 32 districts, except 2, that is Kampala and Mukono, each of the districts have 11 samples. And Kampala and Mukono each had around 10 samples, making total of 350 our sample size. In terms of the demographic distribution, in our sample, we had 60% of the sample were women and 40% as men. 60% of the sample are located in the rural and peri-urban locations and 40% in the urban area. 70% of our sample were educated up to the secondary level or above. And 65% are aged 40 years or below. So these are the major divisions in social demographic. In terms of the type of MSCs that we had, around 12% were agriculture-based MSCs, and we had 51% which were services-related MSCs. 35% were trade-related MSCs, and only 2% that we got on manufacturing. So this is also one data-related challenge that we struggle to get manufacturing-related MSCs, and which are actually low in numbers, mostly where we found agriculture, trade, or service-related MSCs. And in terms of the quality, in terms of the business profile, 71% of the MSC owners reported their business as a major source of their household income. And so this is about the qualitative sample. And the quantitative sample, 64% are women, 54% are from the rural locations, 52% are educated up to the secondary level or above, and 60% are aged 40 years or below. In terms of the distribution of types of MSCs among the quantitative sample, we have 1% only as manufacturing, 12% as agriculture-based, 68% as trading-based, and 19% as services-based. The agriculture-based businesses that include agro-farm supply, farmers, dairy shop, farm produce, market vendor, and poultry. The manufacturing ones are mostly carpenter, local brewery, herbal clinics, etc. The trading ones include electronics, retail shops, clothing, market stall, fishing vendor, food vendor, etc. And the services businesses include tailors, laundry, restaurant, bar, pharmacy, educational institutions, entertainment, driver, transportation, and mobile repairing, etc. On an average, they have been running their businesses for around 8 years. So that's kind of the summary of the sample. Thank you.
Okay, I can see Arnold is nodding in affirmative. That makes us sure that you've responded to our question satisfactorily. Participants, do we have any quick questions or comments? Okay, kindly introduce yourself, tell us where you work, your organization, and please go ahead to ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Robert Intalaka. I work with AmFIU. I have 2 comments. One is actually a question. From the demand side, they indicated that 50% of the respondents indicated that they needed assistance for them to be able to to recover. But we know that there's a lot of interdependence between the supply and demand side. And the supply side indicated that they had registered high losses. Now, if we are to pick from the recommendations that were presented from the demand side, I was wondering whether the supply side was able to present some of these recommendations to their respondents, and how many of the 42 they interacted with were willing to take on some of those recommendations. And one of the things that was recommended was the issue of interest-free loans. I don't know how many institutions were willing to do that. And then the other one of scheduling loans, because I know it is also another challenge. And if we are to pick from what ABI presented, in my opinion, running from 3 to 2 from a business perspective, as that's the interest rate is still on the high side, so there must be something that needs to be done to ensure that the demand side is supported. And then secondly, based on what FSD presented, in my opinion, the value chain approach is a good long-term strategy, but as stakeholders, I believe we need to come up with the short-term strategies to be able to address the challenges that the sectors are facing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robert. And first of all, our appreciation to AMFU for the support given to the consultants. If you saw the report, you're really shining in that area. Thank you. I think this question, Sanjay, are you able to respond to this question? Where the recommendations for the demand side, were you able to bring those out to the institutions and see how they are able to adjust to them?
Yes, thank you. In fact, since completing the study, we have not had any discussions with the SACCOs and MFIs. But we did, in the course of the study, have discussions with them where we talked about how they would meet their fund requirements after COVID was over. In the immediate post-COVID period, how would they meet their fund requirements? So the slide that we presented on the funding of the IFSPs is based on those discussions. So as I said, there is a financing gap, but the financing gap is not as high as we were expecting, and we believe that that with the support of ABI, and various foundations and so on, MasterCard Foundation and so on, that that financing gap can be bridged relatively easily. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Robert, to maybe add to that, it is a takeaway to all of us in this room to understand the findings that have come out of these studies and design ways on how to support to fulfill the requirements. Your comment on the value chain approach, I think this is a comment, not a question. And from FSDU side, we'll take this and look into it and see what else can be done in the short run. Thank you. Do we have any more comments or questions? Yes, sure.
Good morning. Hello?
Tim?
Hello? Yes, okay. Thank you very much. My name is Josephine Olok. I'm representing FITSPA. This, just a quick question to Sanjay to expound on the recommendations to support the MSCs for recovery. You talked about risk sharing and guaranteeing facilities. Could you please expound on how that would work? Thank you.
Sorry, I think the risk sharing and guarantee facility, it was ABI that talked about that. I had merely mentioned the various sources of funding.
Oh, I think it's Microsoft. Yeah. Microsoft team, could you, Rahul, I hope you're still with us.
Yes. Can you please repeat the direct question once more, please? If we can answer that, that is possible.
Yeah, sorry. The question was one of the recommendations you made on risk sharing and guarantee facility. Just wanted to understand how that would work.
Yes. So we provided actually two suggestions. One was if some kind of insurance product can be designed for them, which will actually help them in times of say business discontinuity, or say so that they can actually bounce back in case of there is any further shocks come. The way Joseph was also mentioning in his presentation, that so that we can be ready for the next pandemic or next big shock that can happen with us. So that is one in kinds of business insurance or some business discontinuity insurance. Secondly, if there is some credit guarantee scheme that or credit guarantee fund that can be prepared, which actually can help the FSPs to, in case it can share their risk when they lend the money to the MSCs, so that this credit guarantee scheme can share some of the risk along with the FSPs. So this credit guarantee scheme can be funded by, say, the other donor agencies or with the existing partners, whoever can want to pull their money together. So that was our understanding.
Okay, very good. Yeah, thank you, Rahul, for responding to that question. Yes, we have a question from Irene Ebia, or a comment, a supplement. Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, sir, just a supplement in relation to what the board chair FITSPA has asked about how the guarantees work. Like I said, that at ABI we also have an agricultural loan guarantee, and what we are doing with the Stanbic Enterprise Restart Fund, just to explain it in simple terms, like we give you, like if a customer defaults, let me say on an agricultural loan, and you pursue all possible recovery strategies following the laws and standards of the Financial Institutions Act, and they fail to pay, we can pay back 50% of the principal. So in simple terms, that's what it means. So that instead of the financial institution bearing all the loss, we bear 50% of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Irene. Last call for questions, comments. I think we are within our time actually allocated for Q&A. Can we take that we are all comfortable with the presentations? Okay, Martin, do we have any questions or comments from the chat?
And what are the issues that emerged? तो एक तो हम उस पे मतलब देखना चाह रहे थे. What are the major findings?
Sorry, Sanjay, we didn't get that quite well.
That wasn't, I wasn't speaking. I don't know who it was.
Okay, maybe Rahul. Those are the two voices I've heard online today.
No, that was from not from my side.
It's someone from the other participants.
There's a question from Ujwal to Sanjay and also to Microsave. Should the risk sharing be based on sector-specific MSCs, and similarly, the funding sources in line with particular business activities as per Ugandan landscape?
Yeah, so it's that's it's that question is more in the form of a suggestion. It's actually saying that funding sources should be sector specific. So to the extent that funders are willing and able to do that, that's obviously a much more efficient way of funding both IFSPs and also MSCs. If there are IFSPs that specialize on particular types or particular sectors, which is what Joseph was talking about, it would be appropriate for funding to be specifically designed for those sectors.
Okay, thank you very much. I know that we are going to have guidelines on a way forward from this meeting. So maybe from this moment, Jimmy, I can hand over back to you to give us the next steps and probably closure. Thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you very much, Carol, for moderating this Q&A session. And also thank you, participants, for your various questions and for some points to be clarified. And to the consultants, thank you very much for your various responses, which I think enabled us to, in some cases, put in perspective the issues around the background of the study, the numbers, sampling, and others, add perspective to the context of the study. We have come to the end of our engagement this morning. I believe that we have all picked something out of today's engagement, meaning that we are wrapping up, and I only have one announcement to make, and that is about the next steps or next step. I have had questions about, okay, so can we have access to the presentations, about the reports and others? And I can respond to that by saying within the next 1 week or so, we'll be able to share with you the presentations that were made, as well as the reports. There are 2 reports from demand and supply side. Up to this point, I would like to bring us to the end of this program, but would like to close with a group photo. So if you don't mind, I think we can gather around here. Some can stand down in like the way the thing is stepped, and some up here. So we have a group photo, and then that's the way we're going to end. So thank you very much. You're welcome for the group photo. Guys, can I have help? Maybe we need to put this down, and then we can stand around here. My team for the hotel.
Jimmy, can the online participants leave now?
Yes. Oh, sorry, Sanjay and Rahul. We have come to the end, so you can leave. Thank you very much.
Right. Okay, thank you very much. It was good working with you and with FSDU.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye now.
Okay, bye.